Yep.
Hi, yes, it's the FilmFile, the film show for film geeks by film geeks.
Bam, 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 ba-da-dum, bam. Bam, bam, ba-dum, bam, bam, ba-dum, ba-da-dum, bam, ba-dum.
Is that the
I went to
is that the
80s action theme.
remix version? 3, 2, 1. Hi, welcome to the FilmFile, and welcome to episode 66. Yes, there are 65 previous episodes that if you haven't caught up with, then you should. I'm Lee Ford.
And I'm Andy Meakin.
And welcome to another show.
And there's the whole Bill Gates is like reading all our minds, which is one of the reasons why I watched Thunder Force last week, because I want him to suffer that film like the rest of us have.
Yeah, because they don't track you through your credit card or your phone. Think about it.
Yeah.
So in this week's show, other than talking about coronavirus, in this week's show, we will be giving you our usual news segment where Andy has been trawling the World Wide Web to bring you the latest in news. We are going to do a deep dive into John Boorman's Excalibur. Andy is going to be reviewing Father. What else?
The Father, I've forgotten now. Promising Young Woman and Love and Monsters.
Yeah. The Father, Promising Young Woman, and Love and Monsters. And of course, we will be talking about the penultimate episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. All that to come, but before, Andy, as I said, is kind of the Sherlock Holmes of the film internet site. He will he will dive into the
he will deep drill
delve.
you.
He will dive, and no, I can't say it now. He will dive and into the deepest recesses of the internet to find you all the latest news that's out there in the world of film. We mentioned earlier that Emilia Clarke is joining the Marvel Universe, but another cast member from Game of Thrones, another villain, actually, a Pilar Asbeck, is joining the cast of Aquaman 2. We don't know much about Aquaman 2 at this point, but we now know that they have started casting.
Aquaman. Anyway.
Does whatever a fish can. Was that where you go with that?
Yeah, it does whatever a fish can. They're on the way, and let's move towards music biopics, because sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. Sometimes the
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah, I was trying to think of what to say, but Midasman, I can say man properly.
Yeah,
Midasman is a biopic that's going to be moving into production about Brian Epstein, the Beatles manager.
So if you're enjoying the FilmFile, then hit the subscription button on.
Hey, no.
Hit the subscription button and find the FilmFile on your favorite podcast platform. Every time you subscribe, you get an extra long director's cut of the FilmFile with the hashtag
bigger,
the extended,
longer,
better. Go on, say it.
Bigger,
with
longer,
the hashtag
uncut. Bigger, longer, and uncut.
If you wish.
It has a bigger length than Zack Snyder.
And it's uncut. No, he's Jewish. I'm thrown now. I don't know where I'm going. Is that going to cut? Do you want me to do the whole thing again?
No, that's fine. I'll be able to edit something out of that.
Okay. You can find the FilmFile on all. You can find the FilmFile on all your favorite podcast platforms. And in big news, you can now tune in to the Radiogram with your very favorite FilmFile radio show, which goes out weekly every Thursday on No Barriers Radio, which is an internet online radio station. So I was going to do the old coming in your ears. So there's actually this week's deep dive is a deep dive into the 1981 John Boorman epic, and I don't use the word lightly, but epic medieval fantasy, Excalibur.
I was going to do the dramatic music from Monty Python's Holy Grail then. Dun 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 dun.
I know that's Ruben's got that piece of music in his head. Whenever he wants an action sequence when he's playing, he sings that to himself. Okay, back in. So John Boorman's 1981 epic Excalibur tells the story, or retells the legend of, I'll do that again. So Excalibur, co-written, produced and directed by John Boorman, retells the legend of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And it's based on the 15th century Arthurian romance Le Morte d'Arthur. It starred Nigel Terry as Arthur, Nicole Williams in an amazing turn as Merlin, Nicholas Clay as Lancelot, Sherry Lungi as Guinevere, Helen Mirren as Morgana, a young Liam Neeson as Gawain, Gabriel Byrne as Uther. The casting goes on with Patrick Stewart, a young Patrick Stewart, also making an appearance. The film is named, of course, after the legendary sword by King Arthur and features a prominent Arthur. Start all that again. The film is, of course, named after the legendary sword of King Arthur that features prominently in all Arthurian legend. And I know for Andy, this is one of his favourite films of all time.
Yes, this is a 5-star film for me. When I rewatched it this week, I rated it 5 stars again. I first caught this film at what was possibly too young an age for what was essentially, well, it was a double A when it got released in the UK, which is the equivalent to a 15 in new money. I must have been around 10 when this was rented out on VHS for me. I already had a fascination with the myth and legend of King Arthur. I'd gone to the library and gone through their whole shelf of Arthurian tales, be it fictional things inspired by, or the basis of the myth, the basis of the legend, the possible histories. I loved it. So when this film came out, that's why it was rented for me, because my mum knew it was about King Arthur. So let's get it for him. It's a double A. He should be okay with it. Oh, were they in for a shock? It's a very gritty, it's a very adult take on Arthurian legend, and it takes does some nips and tucks to the story. It changes a few things. The sword in the stone in here is Excalibur, whereas in the actual Arthurian legend, it wasn't. The sword in the stone was a different sword. But it also takes inspiration from other similar myths and legends like Tristan and Isolde. But it combines it all together. Every kind of mythical, heroic knight kind of tale has been combined into a beautiful 2 hours 20 movie that absolutely captivated me as a youngster, absolutely drew me in, and it became something that I regularly went back to rewatch. I would constantly ask, could we get it out from the video shop again, until it came on TV and I managed to record a copy. And I've stuck with it throughout my life. And it's a film that I go back to at least once every 4 years and still love it. And it was this week that I went back and rewatched it, and I just fell in love with it again. You mentioned the casting. The casting of Merlin was the very first thing that struck me as a child watching this. Merlin, up until that point in my head, he was long beard and pointy hat. You know, from the Sword in the Stone, the Disney animation.
Yeah, the Disney Sword in the Stone version was always kind of the image you had as Merlin, and the casting, not the casted, the casting of Nicole Williams was absolutely, sorry, the casting of Nicole Williamson was absolutely superb. He brought a wry sense of humour to the role, and really, and this is where the film succeeds for me. He's made it the definitive version of Merlin in my head.
Yes, I mean, instead we had a robed fibber. We had a robed figure with a silver headpiece. He was eccentric, witty, mysterious, devious, and also he wasn't necessarily good. And that was the key thing. He was a manipulator. He was there to try to keep balance between good and bad, or as represented here by the dark magics and the power of the dragon. And he was magnificent in the part. He absolutely stole any moment as in. And I know that some people, they say that the film suffers when he's not on screen. And I can kind of see that, because he was such a staggering role. His influence on the representations of Merlin throughout the years since has been seen pretty much every time someone's gone for a different kind of approach to Merlin, added a bit more jokiness into it, because he made it so iconic. It would made it a hard bar for future incarnations over my life to live up to, even though things like the BBC TV series of Merlin, quite enjoyed.
Yeah, I mean, Boorman had planned a film adaptation of the Merlin legend way back into the 1960s. He'd submitted a 3-hour script with Roscoe Pallenberg, which got turned down. He was offered Lord of the Rings, which at one point was to feature the Beatles. But Boorman persisted. He shopped this around. No studio would commit to it. And eventually, it was probably noted that I'll just start that. And it was probably important that much of the imagery that he came up with and the set design was created for his original version of Lord of the Rings. I like this film an awful lot. I don't love it. I think there are some problems within the storytelling which make it very difficult for me. And there's one key sequence in particular, which is when I was taught screenwriting, this scene always came up. But I don't want to bore you with that. What I do think it is, as much as I mentioned Nicole Williamson's definitive version of playing Merlin, it is always in my head the definitive version of Excalibur. And we've seen that it has that legacy when other King Arthur legends crop up every now and then. I'm looking at the recent version, or should I say, I'm not. And even though I don't love it, and I think of it as a film that I admire, you cannot ignore the grand scope and epic quality to this film, because Boorman makes you feel it and makes you feel as though you're part of this drama, and it's got just an amazing visual style and a lot of scope. And to some extent, I think this was Boorman's last really big studio picture before he started to do things that were more heartfelt, like Hope and Glory, for instance. But as I said, I don't have the love for it that you do. But what I do is I admire it tremendously.
This is a film that benefits a lot from high definition releases of modern day, because watching this on TV back in the VHS days, the detail that I've seen watching it this week was lost. Camelot is described as being made of gold and silver. Yes, the brickwork is painted over silver and gold, so it absolutely matches it. The detail on the armor, I love the designs of the armor. Everything's got a unique design to it. But what I like most about this film overall, when it comes to portraying knights and their battles, is it's no longer this daring do of mythical knights who are perfect swordsmen. It's clumsy, brutal battles in mud, sullying their shining armor and falling over and ending up drowning. It's dirty fighting as it should be. The only part of the film that I feel kind of suffers is the search for the Grail aspect. I think that's the point in the film that it kind of feels a tad clunky. And I think it's more because of what we don't see than what we do. And I did read a few years ago that there was approximately 35 to 40 minutes of edits that were made and cut things out. And I suspect a lot of that was around this element that just feels to start, oh, go find the Grail. And then we just find, oh, well, everyone's dead now, except for you, and you found it. Well, what happened? And that's what lets it down for me. But I can see past that and still love the film overall. It's a definitive King Arthur tale, like you've said. It's not as definitive as it could be, and I think if someone can get it right, we could get an even more definitive Arthurian legend tale. I think it would need to be a TV series in order to actually give it a time to flow and do it all. But I need to do a quick mention to the music as well. The original score by Trevor Jones was really good, but the use of classical pieces such as O Fortuna from Carl Orff served the film so well. I mean, it's the tune which everyone thinks is the Old Spice music in the UK, but it adds atmosphere. It gives it that depth of character to the whole environments. When they're riding to the battle to O Fortuna, you can't help but just be like, and rallied along with them. I love this film, in case you can't tell, and I will happily rewatch this over and over again.
It's certainly a film of its. I'll start again. It's certainly a film of its time, and it's a film in which it was kind of the end of an era for that kind of filmmaking, when you had a director like Boorman who could go out and make the sort of film that he wanted to make. It sits really as a period piece. It's got everything that works well for Boorman. It's got that internal logic that's right. It's got that hypnotic quality. It's got that huge scale. It misses some of the dramatic intensity that it deserved, and maybe that's the cut that we got. Sometimes it gets a little bit silly, and again, that is sometimes what Boorman has a tendency to stray into. He's not always been successful with his storytelling, but it is a truly inspiring take on the Arthurian legend. And as we've both said, still to this day, I think it is the definitive King Arthur movie and Merlin movie. Interestingly enough, it's Zack Snyder's favorite film and inspired him probably more than anything else.
Yes. Which is why he's also looking at creating his own King Arthur project, because this was the film that inspired him, basically, as a youngster, to go into making movies. So that's why I'm excited about Zack Snyder maybe tackling King Arthur, because I'm hoping that the influence of this film will channel through that. If you've never watched Excalibur, when you watch it, be prepared to be constantly pointing at the screen going, that's it, because Liam Neeson, very young Liam Neeson, Patrick Stewart, Gabriel Byrne, Helen Mirren, Sherry Lungi, some marvellous spot the people moments. And Patrick Stewart is brilliantly overplaying his role, which kind of fits for the bravado and gusto of Leon deGrance. When his very first scene, when he attempts to pull the sword from the stone, I don't know whether it's intentionally or unintentionally hilarious, but I found myself chuckling because he's just like, no, marvelous overacting, but fits it so beautifully. Thoroughly recommend this film.
It's quite interesting. I don't know if you knew that Helen Mirren and Nicole Williamson weren't particularly good friends, and they'd had some animosity due to a stage production. I think it was Macbeth, and Boorman makes that work for them on screen because they have that animosity within the scenes that they play, and it's just one of those elements that really ticks the boxes. As I said, not a film that I love. I know that Andy does. A film that I admire, but it's a film that is well worth watching if you are into the Arthurian legend. As I said, for me, it's the definitive version so far. My neat thing for this week is an app that you can get at the App Store, which at the moment I've just completely forgotten what it's called. But I'll be back in a second because I'm going to have to go and look at the app.
Me.
I'll see you next week, Andy. In the meantime, take care.
And you ready for
no quote?
Yeah. Give me a quote. I need a quote.
But Andy, before we go, look into my eyes, the eyes of the dragon, and despair.
Nice. Nice.